What was his name? Oh, I can't believe I already forgot. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the 203rd episode of the Inbound Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. Today, we have a memory expert, Brad Zupp. But if you missed our previous episode, it was with the one and only Sean Casey Williams. He's a new VP with VaynerMedia. If you're not familiar with the company that Gary Vaynerchuk created, you will want to check out that episode. Gary is a very well-known internet marketer, business owner, YouTube sensation, social media marketer. I mean, the guy has done it all, turned his family's business around with his Wine Library TV, was an early adopter of Twitter and YouTube, and he's created, I think it's a $100 million company now called VaynerMedia that does consulting for businesses of all shapes and sizes, especially the big boys. And Sean runs a division of his company. Sean has an interesting background, has worked with some major brands as well. His insight on social media and how to use it today is quite illustrious. His answer was not what I was expecting when I asked him how to leverage social media. So you want to make sure and check that out, and that is at thesaleswhisperer.com/session 202. Next week, I've got Louis Bruno coming up, a young guy that has built an HVAC company in Florida from nothing to humongous fast, and he is still young. So you're going to want to tune in to learn his tips and tricks and get inspired on how he has grown such a big business so fast. Today, like I said, we've got Brad Zupp. You can listen to this at thesaleswhisperer.com/session 203. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a new opt-in, and it's called the Inbound Sellers. And it's a free opt-in, and it is a daily email. And you're going to get a 30-plus page PDF of my first paid version of Inbound Sellers. It's a $97 subscription, but you get a digital copy of the first one. And in that program, I give you the exact email sequence, the PSs, the titles, the links, the references to my multimedia. So you'll get the exact content I used to launch another program about a year and a half ago. So, and it's free. You can opt out at any time, but I encourage you to check that out. Again, if you go to any of the blogs, really, you'll see the opt-in in the top right-hand side. And get ready for me to dump some knowledge bombs on you every day. So buckle in. You know, and I tell people all the time, unsubscribe. There's so many things you're getting that's cluttering up your inbox, and just the 3 to 5 second delay it takes you to read, click the delete button, you know, it shifts your thinking. It distracts you. So dial back on all the things you're allowing into your brain. I'm spending less time on social media myself. I'm using tools like HubSpot to monitor and publish, so it keeps me from getting distracted, clicking around on all the other links, seeing what people are doing. It's just, you know, when you look at the majority of people that are successful in business, they leverage social media, they leverage newsletters, they leverage email, but they don't let it consume them. They don't let those tools leverage them. You know, and I just had an interview yesterday with a guy named Tim Sanders. He's coming up on episode 207. But, you know, he had a great line that, what was it? If you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And the same thing holds true with social media. All of those things are free to log into and use, which means you are the product. And I'm doing more and more with paid traffic, paid targeting, custom audiences on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. It's crazy the amount of information these companies have on all of us. And so are you using these tools to grow your business and to expand your brain, or are you using it to numb your brain? And I think most people are using it to numb themselves. So while I encourage you to sign up for my free daily Pearls of Wisdom, at the same time, I'm urging you to unsubscribe from 10 others. If nothing else, turn on your email filters and route those emails that you think you want to get. Route them to a folder, a read later folder, email marketing ideas folder, but skip your inbox. That way, you can set time on your calendar for personal developments or checking email. Go skim those, see the ones worth keeping, pull them out, drag them to your calendar, right? Set a time to read them, download the PDFs that are included, click the links, bookmark those so you can reference them later, and then get back to business. So really start to guard your time, protect your time. That's all you have. People always talk about time management. How can I get better at time management? You cannot manage your time if you don't have a tight list of priorities, and those priorities need to be very few, right? Prior means what comes first, right? You can't have 100 priorities. All of a sudden, then nothing is a priority. So what are your key 1, 2, 3 priorities? Rank order them, and then focus on those. And everything else must fall to the wayside. Okay, so get very focused on what you want to accomplish. Get very focused on what information and people you need in your lives that can help you get there, and remove all others. It really is that simple. Brad will get into that. When we talk about how to have a better memory, he drives home the point that most of us have very good memories. But what happens is we never prepare ourselves to allow the information to come in the first place. So you can't remember what you never learned. And so we're running around talking ourselves out of performing. We tell ourselves over and over, oh, I'm bad with numbers. Oh, I'm bad with names. Oh, I'm bad with faces. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you need to focus. That's why I say get emails off of your inbox. Unsubscribe, or at a minimum, get them out of your inbox. Put them in a folder you can review later, because you cannot multitask. They've already proven that. Multitasking is a myth. All you're doing is switching rapidly between tasks. But you're not multitasking. You're doing one thing, but what happens is you're doing 4 or 5 or 7 things poorly, which is why you don't get anything done, which is why you're tired, which is why you go home at the end of the day despite putting in extra hours and feel unaccomplished, because you are unaccomplished, because you're multitasking. It doesn't exist. So, you don't have time management, you have self-management. And the old saying, work expands to fill the time allotted. If you're going on vacation tomorrow, I bet today you'd be very effective, despite having the same number of hours in the day, because you're going to set your priorities, set your to-do list, everything else, including checking Facebook, checking on your fantasy sports teams, all of that will fall to the wayside because the plane is leaving whether you're on it or not. So intuitively, natively, at your core what needs to get done, and you do it when you're up against a tight deadline. So the trick is to give yourself those types of deadlines on a daily, even an hourly, or even a 15-minute interval, and hit those deadlines. Get things done, and then go enjoy your life. Okay? So now let's enjoy Mr. Brad Zupp. Brad Zupp, all the way from Saratoga Springs, New York. Memory athlete, speaker, memory improvement expert. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How the heck are you?
I'm doing great, Wes. Thank you very much for having me.
So, memory expert. What the heck? How did that come to be? Can you kind of give us a little thumbnail sketch of how you landed here, and then we'll dive down the rabbit hole?
Definitely. Well, when I was younger, I had a horrible memory for names, which is really bad for the sales careers I ended up in, and for numbers, which is also bad for a salesperson. And I just thought it was just one of those things. I'll work hard to overcome it, which I did. And when I turned 40, I found myself walking into rooms and not knowing why I was there. I'd walk into the office conference room and I'd go, what did I come in here for? Or I would be at home and I'd walk in, from the kitchen to the bedroom and I go, well, it's not bedtime. Why am I here? And that really scared me because 40 was just a number. I'm just a 40, big deal. I'm not any more mature. So 40 is just a number. And when I realized that my memory was fading even more, that really bothered me. I had an uncle who passed away after 10 years of dealing with Alzheimer's. So my aunt basically stayed at home for 10 years and took care of him. And it was horrible to watch him go like that and suffer and not know us and then not know his kids and then not know his wife and not know who he was or where he was. It was just horrible. So I thought, you know what? I don't know if this runs in my family. I don't know if there's something I can do about it, but I'm going to do my best to improve my memory. Let me see if an ordinary guy can improve his memory. And I did some research. I looked online. I read some books, and I realized that memory improvement is possible, and it can even be fun. Now, fun's relative. Some people find golfing fun. Some people find it boring. So for me, it's one of those, the first time I tried to memorize a deck of cards just to see if I could, I kind of got bit by the bug. And it's like the first time you slam dunk a basketball or the first time you hit a long drive with a golf ball or whatever sport you're a part of. The first time you do it well, you're like, whoa, this is fun. And I kept going back to it.
Man. All right. So now we got to get into some of the nitty gritty.
Yes.
Because I have tried some of it, but I admit I have not had a big motivation to stick with it because it is a learned skill, just like hitting a golf ball.
Yes.
And I got my first, when I turned 23, my dad bought me golf lessons. So I don't know if he loved me or hated me. Because
it could really go either way.
Oh my gosh, it's like worse than crack, because you're right. You hit that one good shot, you hit 87 buckets of balls and hack around, and then you hit that one sweet shot, and you go, oh man, all right, let's do it again.
I can do that again. 3 buckets later, you almost have a good shot. Yes,
exactly. And so, is there a less painful way that you've discovered to help us learn and remember? Because you're right, in sales, it's so important. The sweetest thing we can hear is our own name. And if you can remember somebody's name, that's huge. Your connection with them goes up, which helps. We always know people buy from people they know, like, and trust. Well, if they like and trust you, if you remember them. So is there a less painful way or maybe a little bit faster way? At least we can get some quick benefits so we can get hooked and dive in?
Absolutely. That's really where I try to differentiate myself from other people that might talk about memory is, you can really dive in deep or you can scratch the surface, and it really depends on what you need. If you're doing a lot of inbound sales and you're doing a lot of volume, do you really need to remember the sound of someone's voice and remember that, oh yeah, they're the person that wanted, widget number 3 in blue when they called me for 30 seconds 3 weeks ago? Not really. But if you're doing higher volume or higher dollar sales things, it's so important to remember people's names and the details. They mentioned their son's Little League game. And, 2 weeks later when you're following up with them, you say, hey, and how did your son do with his Little League game? I know he was very excited about that. And that just pleases people. So for me, it's a matter of figuring out where you're going wrong first. Like with any coach, I look at, if you're going back to golfing, if your short game is good, you work on your long game. You might need to work on your short game a little bit to keep it fresh. But if you're horrible at your driver, you need to get that out and practice it. So for me, it's figuring out where someone's going wrong. So there's 3 distinct steps to figuring out where you're having trouble with memory, so you can work on the appropriate thing. So you need to get the information. That's first. You can't remember something next week if you don't hear the person's name well, you're not going to remember it 2 minutes later when you're trying to say goodbye to them. Then you need to save it. You need to organize it in your mind. The mind likes to save information in certain ways. You have to help it. And then you need to recall. So getting the information is kind of like in one ear and out the other. If you're like, oh, That's what happens to me. Then you need to focus on getting the information, focusing, paying attention in the moment, not multitasking. If your problem is saving the information, you need to do some certain things like translating what you need to remember into a picture. And if the recall is your problem, it's like, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's on the tip of my tongue. If you're saying that, that's more of a recall thing where you put on the spot, you can't remember it for 30 seconds until the person turns around, walks away, and you're like, oh, his name is Joe. That's his name. That's a recall issue. So I always talk to people and say, where do you think you have the most trouble? Because that's really where you need to start. Does that make sense?
Sure. And I would bet that most people fail at number one.
Yes.
It never goes in, so they can't, I have a terrible memory. No, you don't. You don't listen.
You're not paying attention.
If you would listen, because if I ask them if they're into something, right, it's like, hey, who was the, NFL MVP, 1988? You're like, oh, offensive or defense? And they just rattle it off. It's like, obviously you have a good memory for what you're passionate about, right?
Yep. Or you can remember all the people you spoke with today, but you can't remember what your spouse says to bring home from the grocery store.
Right.
It's like, well, honey, this is important. This is where our money comes from. And well, that's just the groceries. Well, she might or he might not feel the same way about that.
Exactly.
So really, you're exactly right. Most people think they might have a problem with the second step or the third step. Most people have a problem with the first step. And the biggest, simplest, low-hanging fruit is stop multitasking. I've heard you do it listening to some of your podcasts. It's like you're talking to people and you're looking. Someone says, "Oh, go to this website. That's a great place to figure out, the market for your new widget. Is there a market?" And you're like, "Oh, let me type. I can see you." And then I think even one time you mentioned, "Oh, I'm multitasking." When we multitask, our brain is focused on a bunch of different things at once, which it does well, and it's fun. It makes us feel good when we can do a whole bunch of things at once. But studies have found over and over, if you listen to the scientists, that it's a myth. We can't focus all our attention on several different things at once. What we're doing is we're going A, B, C, D, A, C, B, A, C, D, B, and we're just kind of flitting back and forth. And that's fine if we're doing things that don't require a ton of attention, or if we don't really care about, remembering them for long term. But if we're focused on a client, we're going to remember a lot more of what they say than if we're focused on the client and then going, okay, now what could I sell them? Or I wonder if I'm going to be late for my next appointment, or, anything is going on in our minds. We need to be 100% present. So stop multitasking. If we're doing email, do email. If we're surfing the web, surf the web. If we're updating our social media, update our social media. Turn off the other things. If we're updating our social media, turn off email. If we're replying to emails, turn off social media. Just do one thing at a time, and at the end of the day, you'll be able to remember a lot more of what you did in those 10 minutes or hour or 2 hours that you were updating your social media or doing email.
Okay, so let's say we are heading to a trade show or, Chamber of Commerce mixer or something, and maybe there's somebody there for sure that we want to meet, but obviously there's diamonds in the rough, right? There's somebody there like we'd be really glad to meet. How do we, but we don't know they're there, right? But if we can put our best foot forward, if we can be present and remember their names, right? Be ready for that chance encounter with that top prospect. It's going to improve our sales lives, which will improve our lives because we'll make more money and we can chill out and get that beach in the Bahamas. But so how do we, like in that scenario, how can someone get ready to have a better memory, to have better input, so to give them a chance for a recall, because that's a very common situation, right, for salespeople.
Yep. And that's a great question. We experience that all the time, whether it's a Chamber of Commerce mixer or even a presentation where we're going in to pitch a group of people, and there's 6 people in a boardroom or whatever, and we're introduced to them real quickly and we remember none of their names. And we're going, boy, it'd be really nice to be able to, when, the person at the head of the table kind of raises their hand, we're like, was it Jeff, Joe, Jim, John? Yes. Do you have a question?
Right.
It'd be nicer to know the name. So with names especially, well, let me address the just going in. A lot of it in sales, I think, is, I've heard you talk about mindset. We have to be in the right head to sell. We have to be in the right head. We have to feel good about ourselves and all that stuff. So, going to a mixer or going to a meeting, take a 30 seconds or a minute or 5 minutes in the car. Make sure you get there early and just say, okay, you know what? I'm going to let go of everything else that's going on at the office. I'm going to let go of all the deadlines. I'm just going to be here now. And I'm going to go in. I'm going to meet people. I'm going to be present. I'm not going to be worried about anything. You get a mint or two, so you're not worried, does my breath smell? You check your teeth in the mirror. There's nothing in my teeth, so I don't have to worry about anything. Now I just have to meet people. And the thing that helped me most with names is when I first started working with memory, I really wanted to work on names because I was really horrible at it. And now I realize I was really not present. I was really not hearing names. So now the first time I meet someone, the first topic of conversation is their name. That's all we talk about. I know what I'm going to talk about. I don't have to worry about, should I ask, do you come to all these mixers, or, is this your first one, or what's your company? The first thing is their name. Because, like you said, people love to hear the sound of their own name. So it's like, nice to meet you. What's your name? Wes? Oh, Wes. Is that short for something? And okay, is it W-E-S? Is it two S's or just one S? There's always something we can ask.
Don't put two S's on it, fool. Come on now.
And see, that is so memorable. That is so memorable.
I pity the fool who puts two S's on my name.
And your just natural reaction like that, which probably hearing you talk on your podcast is your natural reaction if someone said that to you at a mixer, that would be so much more memorable than going, hi, my name's Wes, and, I'm a professional sales trainer.
Right.
And
here you go. Here's I'm going to throw you a curveball. So,
great.
Hey, Brad, I'd like you to meet Wes, Shannon, Jake, Matthew, Elise, Sarah, Mary Claire, Ella, and Ava. Oh, and there's the in-laws, Phyllis and Ken over there. Because that's what usually happens. You're just like, hi, everybody. And you don't even remember the first person.
Yep. And it's like, what I do in that situation, because that happens a lot where, Wes, I'd really like to meet the team. I'd like you to meet the team you'll be working with. And and they start going on the line. And the first thing you say is, wait, I'd love to try at least to remember everybody's names, and I can't get them 3 per second. So what's your name? What's the first person? I'm sorry, I didn't hear Wes tell me. Okay, Shannon. Oh, Shannon. Okay, great. Nice. I've got a really close friend named Shannon. That's great. Okay, and what's your name? Oh, okay. And then you just go down the line. You take control of the situation, just like in sales. Sometimes you have to take control of the conversation, and you pause, you stop it, and say, I'd like to at least have a chance at remembering your names. Okay. And I can't do that if we're just going, here's everybody, boom, 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 boom. So let's do it one-on-one. Great. Okay. And you just slow it down.
And I'm thinking through this. Like, if there's a big conference room full of people, like initially, I'm just thinking through this out loud, that would seem a little bit awkward.
Yep.
But as the meeting goes on and you're using everybody's names, people slowly get impressed.
Yes, and in a pitching type situation where you're in a conference room,
right,
it would be kind of awkward. But normally those introductions are done kind of during the mingling before the presentation starts, where you see your contact who invited you in to do the pitch. And you hopefully know and remember their names. You go, oh, Wes, thanks for bringing me in. And usually Wes goes, oh, and I'd like you to meet Shannon. She's the vice president in charge of sales. Oh, Shannon, nice to meet you. And if he does try to go several in a row, and before we get started, there's Joe and Sam and and say, great, I didn't catch all those names. As we go on, when you have a question, I'll call on you, and if you could then remind me of your name, because I can't get them that quick, obviously, and make a little joke out of it. And people are fine with that.
Right.
People know that they can't remember the names. They're probably not even remembering one person's name. They're not even remembering the salesperson's name. It's like, they're going up to him, Wes, what was that guy's name again? And that's just one. They just had to remember the one person. So
right.
Everybody's familiar with this. So it's a matter of making light of the situation, taking charge of the conversation, and just having a conversation about someone's name, because that gives your mind a few extra seconds to to kind of cue in, okay, it's Wes, and he said, he made that joke about no S's, but he didn't ever answer me about whether that's short for Wesley or something like that. But just that 10, 20 seconds of having a conversation gives your mind, it's like a sponge. Your mind is a sponge, but if you're just touching the spill of water real quick, the sponge doesn't have a chance to soak anything in. But if you leave the sponge on for 20, 30 seconds, this is going to soak up a lot more. It's just natural.
So let's say you're going through the presentation and, you call on such and such, and it goes, so tell me your name again. It goes, Jake. I mean, so do you do it for everyone? Would I go, Jake, hey, that's my son's name. Okay, cool. Jake. Okay, what's going on? I mean, do you say that for everybody the first time through?
If at all possible, yeah. If it's a very uncomfortable situation, if it's, I don't believe that your product can actually do this, I wouldn't go on and on about, someone's name. You have to play it by ear. But any type of, maybe even internally, while he's asking his long-winded question, you can be like, okay, Jake, oh, my best friend's dog is named Jake. All right. That's funny.
I hated that dog. I kicked him when his parents and family wasn't around.
Chewed my hammer. I was on the ground because I was nailing up things when I was taking dog sitting for him. So, yeah, I mean, anything in your mind that doesn't completely detract from listening to his question is fine. But if you can just have a conversation about someone's name or make a comment or ask for spelling. I mean, Jake's pretty easy, but even like John, you can say, is that, John, great. Before you get to your question, is that Jon or John? Okay, great. And the more you do it, the top three kind of for me are stop multitasking, have a conversation about someone's name. And the third thing is just to try.
Right.
That anything we put our minds to and our attention on, we generally get better at. Whether it's putting or driving or sales or listening to our kids or listening to our spouses, we get better at it if we say, you know what, this month or today or this year, it's all about trying to close better, or it's about listening better. I'm going to be present, or I'm going to be more patient, or I'm going to try to remember more. And as soon as we tell ourselves that with whatever it is, it becomes an important part of us, and we make an effort. And anything we make an effort on, our brain starts kind of going, whoa, well, I guess he's serious about this. I guess I should really try to remember this. And that just naturally kind of kicks us into overdrive or a turbo mode with our memories. And we just find ourselves remembering better just naturally. Because think of all the things we remember already. We remember well. We remember so much. I mean, song lyrics and the lines to movies and, the price of that product. And we just remember so much stuff. So it's just a matter of giving our brains a few more clues. And the stopping multitasking, the trying to remember, the repeating someone's name when you hear it, not in a creepy way. Because that's kind of a Dale Carnegie course thing. I'll repeat someone's name. It's like, oh, Wes, nice to meet you. Oh, Wes, do you come to this mixer a lot? And because I haven't seen you before here, Wes. And oh, Wes, do you have any kids or family? And that's interesting, Wes. Eventually Wes kind of goes, this guy's weird and creepy.
Well, usually they figure that out right away. So I really don't meet many people. That's my excuse for staying home. I just say I like being home, but really nobody likes me. So.
And that's easier to remember because you only meet one or two people a week. You're
right.
Good.
That's right.
So don't be creepy about it. So that's why I like to just have a conversation. Wes, I'm going to remember that as Wesley Crusher from, Star Trek. Is it short for Wesley? Is something like that. It's a 5 or 10 second off the cuff remark. And that'll just be like Velcro to your mind for a name.
So why do we remember a joke or a line from a movie without even trying, but we don't remember names?
Names are so abstract, for one thing. The other thing with a movie or a joke, someone's telling you a joke, and generally jokes are visual. So in your mind, it's kind of like reading. We're not maybe consciously picturing the joke. But if, it's like, two golfers are walking down the fairway, and one of them says, a part of your mind has an image of two golfers walking down the fairway. So it's a visual. And that's the other part our brain likes is the visual. So movies, same thing. We remember the one character saying that. And It's interesting. There's a visual connection to it. So the saving the information part we talked about earlier, the 3 steps. Anytime, this is more of an advanced technique, but anytime you need to remember something you're having trouble remembering, not like in the spur of the moment names. Some people say picture names, picture, well, Stephen. Okay, well, I picture Steve sounds like stove. You change one letter and you got a stove. So I picture a wood stove. And if he has anything like red on his face, or if his nose is big or his teeth are straight, the teeth can be logs in his mouth, and the nose can be the chimney, and the face, he's got a red face just naturally. So that's a red hot, wood stove. I can remember his name is Steve. That's an advanced technique. But anytime we can remember something, I work with kids and college students a lot. And, you get 19 things. Our kids get 19 vocabulary words and remember, or 20 vocabulary words and remember 19 of them just from reading them a couple times. And then there's that one thing you have trouble remembering. And maybe for a salesperson, it's the one price for that one product. Just for some reason, it's an odd price. It just doesn't stick, or it's the term life product or the whole life product. You can't remember the little details for that. If you can translate anything into a picture, that's the key. So if there's a number you need to remember and you just, for some reason, it's just not sticking, the product number or whatever, you can go, well, okay, you're a golfer and it's 162. Well, boy, if I shot 162, I'd be happy or I'd be unhappy. Or, it's whatever. You can always translate something. If you're a runner, it's like, okay, that's 2529. Okay, well, 25. If I ran a 5K in 2529, that would be about average for me. So you can always kind of translate something into a picture. And right. That's why we remember things like that so well. Even song lyrics, we're generally just hearing them. We're not reading them. Or these days, we're not watching, MTV like I did growing up. But we hear and, someone singing about the person breaking up with them or running over the dog or shake it off or whatever. And you get a visual for that. And that's why things stick with us, because the mind loves to remember in a visual way.
I'm so old, man. I remember when MTV used to actually play music videos.
I remember the day MTV came on. I rushed home from school to see MTV start. Yep. I remember that. And that's a moment. Sometimes we say, well, why to remember certain moments? And that's why, I don't know if you've experienced this. And, unfortunately, in life, everyone's life, a little rain must fall. We tend to remember the bad things more than the good things. Mm-hmm. We go, why is that? We tend to tell people our stories. And we tell people our stories, we tell the bad things. Oh, and then she did this to me, and then I had to do this, and then I said this, and then she said that. And we rehearse those. We remind ourselves over and over, because we might, that person cut me off, and I thought they had a gun, and I was going to get shot, and road rage, and I saw the thing on the news last night about that road rage, and we might tell 5 people that night, that next day. Oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me yesterday. And that will stick with us. But do we tell people, I was driving home and there was this beautiful sunset and I looked across the street and my neighbor's roses were just starting to bloom. It was beautiful. Do we tell 5 people that? No. So what do we remember? The jerk that cut us off and not the beautiful sunset with the roses. So the other tip to remembering well is review the things that you want to have stick with you. Whether that's work or whether it's, something our spouse or our kids say. The natural times to do that are brushing your teeth at night. I don't like, when I brush my teeth at night, I don't like to review the work day so much. I do that when I go home or when I go for a walk after dinner. I kind of review my work day. It's like, well, who did I talk to today? I talked to Wes. There's only one E in Wes. Okay, that's good. And his podcast. Okay, and we had a great talk. And it sounds like he's a golfer too. And he's a funny guy. And I'll just review the things that happened that I want to remember. And that tells the mind, it's kind of like if your mind is a computer, if you picture that, and your laptop or your computer or your phone or whatever you use as your main, computing device, imagine that it was almost full of information. And every night when you went to sleep, you plugged it in, if it's your phone, or when you put it to sleep, if it's your computer, it threw away 2/3 of what you saved on the hard drive that day. Because that's what our brains do. Even me, the memory guy, my brain goes, wow, I took in all that information. I can't keep track of all that. It's just not you. Can't handle it. So I'm going to throw this big chunk, 2/3 away. And I hope you didn't eat any of that. So if you had a computer that did that every night, and you know that every night about 10, 11 o'clock at night, it's going to delete 2/3 of what you saved on it today, you'd be very careful before you went to sleep to go, okay, I want to save this. I want to save this. I want to save this. I want to save, if you're only going to save 1/3, I want you to save these things. The other stuff, okay, if you're going to throw it away, throw that stuff away, but not this stuff. You tell your computer, don't throw that away.
Okay.
And that's what we need to tell our brains. We do that just by telling a story. We can tell our spouses or our kids or our business partners, hey, you know what happened to me today? I talked to Wes, and he was a really cool guy, and I think he's going to, he said he's going to run it by his manager, but I think they're going to close the sale. Great. That'll help you remember that Wes is, moving along the funnel. And tell our spouse, hey, I saw this beautiful sunset on the way home. That'll help you remember it. Or you can say, I met 20 people at the mixer, and as I drive home, that woman, she had beautiful blonde hair. What was her name? Oh, Julie. Okay, yeah, Julie. Okay. And that one, I was at Jay. It was another Jim. Okay. And you just do that as you drive home. And then the next morning, you drive to work or you drive wherever you go. You do the same thing. Yesterday, I met all those people at the mixer. What were their names? Okay, it was the blonde. What was the blonde? Oh, Julie. And then it was another Jay. That was a guy. His name was Jim. Okay. And that tells your mind, move this stuff from short term, throw it away, to long term, hold on to it.
So that brings up two good points. So like names and phone numbers. I mean, you mentioned Steve and Stove, and I've heard that as well. Mike. Well, Mike is like a microphone. So picture, a microphone coming out of his ears or hitting him in the head with a microphone. But I mean, it's like, okay, how many things do I have to remember? Like my sister's name is Rachel. Well, I mean, what is Rachel? I can't think of anything that, a rake. Okay, a rake. So Rachel, she's raking. I mean, golly, is that the only way?
That's a more advanced technique to changing it into a picture. And I only recommend that when it's something like you can't remember. Like you've met this prospect or this person at the mixer 4 times. And for the life of you, you cannot remember that her name is Rachel. And it's just like, oh, there's that woman again. I don't know what it is about her. I just cannot remember her name. I know I've met her. I've met her 4 times. I know that I've met her that time and I met her that. You can list the times you've met her, but for some reason her name doesn't stick. That's when you go, okay, this time I'm going to apologize. I'm going to say, I don't know if you remember, my name is Wes or my name is Brad, and I just cannot remember your name, and I'm sorry. Can you remind me, please? And she'll probably like, oh, yeah, my name is Rachel. I get that all the time. And then you go, okay, Rachel. And you have a conversation like Rachel, like on Friends. Okay, Rachel. Yeah. Does she look anything at all like Rachel from Friends? Does she have beautiful hair? Does she have blondish brown hair? Is it perfectly cut? Is it a horrible haircut? Because the opposite is also easy to remember. You can go, oh, that's an ugly haircut, or she's a horrible hair. Her hair's totally curly and black. That's not at all like Rachel on Friends. And that's enough, usually, at least for my mind, to cue in. Or you might go, okay, Rachel. Well, like a stingray and a shell. A stingray is flying over that curly hair and dropping shells in it. I bet if she shook her head no, all these shells would fall out. So next time, you might not get everything, but you'll be like, okay, it's something to do with a shell. I see all these shells in her hair. Shelly, Rachel. Our minds have these like memory detectives in them. And all the memory detective is going, right now you give me 0 clues. You give me 1 clue and it'll help. You give me 2 or 3 clues. I'll solve the case for you. I'll impress people. I'll get you more business. I'll make your wife and your kids happier with you if you just give me a few clues. So that's one way to do it. But the picturing something is much more advanced. You generally, when you meet most people, unless they have a real problem, and I generally end up coaching the people that have the real problems, but most people, when they start using these techniques, when they start saying, I'm going to try to remember the names, and I'm going to make sure I hear the name. I'm going to have an appropriate, interesting remark about their name, even if it's just how do you spell that, or oh, that's interesting. How did your family pick that? Or I'm named after a great grandfather. Are you named after anyone in your family? That's an interesting name, Wes. And just that is enough for most people because we generally have decent names and we just need a little help.
So you say that's an advanced way. So what's a simpler way?
The simpler way is just doing
just repeating it,
meeting the person, repeating it, asking them a question about their name, and just having that general conversation about it and trying to connect it to something in your life. Oh, my best friend's dog is named Jake. I probably wouldn't say that out loud. There's a funny Office episode where Michael Scott, tells people how he remembered their name, and it's totally inappropriate and uncomfortable, of course, because it's The Office. And he's saying, "Oh, you're bald, so I remembered you because you're bald and you have an ugly skull." And you don't really want to tell people, "Oh, stove, and you got a big nose, so I'm remembering that's the stovepipe." You don't necessarily need to tell people that, but if you can say, "Oh, Steve, excuse me, Steve, yeah, I have a best friend named Steve. He's living in Japan, and do you travel much?" That's just a lead in.
Right.
Instead of saying, "Oh, have you tried the buffet?" It's something to talk about. Or instead of saying, "Oh, yeah, my name's Brad, and I'm a memory guy, and I'd like to come to your company." And nobody wants to be pitched right off the bat. So this is just an easy way to break the ice. The slightly more advanced technique than that's not an advanced technique for remembering their name, but when you get to the point where you are willing to have a conversation about someone's name, then you can start saying, "Oh, and my name is Brad." And I don't know if you heard that or not. I just want to tell you again, my name is Brad. And a couple different ways you could remember that. It is short for Bradley. It's not short for Bradford, though. My father-in-law always calls me Bradford, and I tell him it's Bradley. Ed, it's Bradley. So it's short for Bradley. And my parents had decided my name was Mark, but when I was born, the nurse said, "What's his name?" And they were looking at me going, "He is not a Mark. He's a Brad," which was the backup name. And have you ever seen those bronze kind of paperclippy type things? They're not very common anymore. They hold the 3-ring binders together. They're called Brads. So you can picture that. Picture me like, I got a big nose. Picture me stuffing one of those up my nose. Or, there's Brad Paisley or Brad Pitt. And I'm not nearly as handsome as either one of those, as you can see. And you can have a conversation. You can make a joke, and they'll remember your name.
Right.
Because you're helping them. And they'll probably then be willing to have a conversation even deeper about their name. And it's instant rapport, which is salespeople we certainly need to do. And it's something everybody can relate to. So it's great.
Now, what about phone numbers? I mean, I've seen some of these memory programs where they have like the ta-da, Rob. I mean, you're making up words. And
so
I mean,
called the major system, yes?
That seems so hard.
It is.
Is there a better way, or is that just how it is?
But that's the technique to changing numbers into each number has a sound, and then you put the numbers together. So the N is a 2 is an N sound because the 2 on its side looks like an N. So if you put the number 22 is an N, so you could have none. So you could picture a none if you need to remember 22. And that's the technique I use to remember 240 digits in 5 minutes in memory competitions. It's great. I use the analogy kind of like the difference between walking, riding a bike, and driving a car. If you know, hey, I live in New York City, born here, I plan to live here all my life. Do you need to spend a lot of time learning to drive a car? And the answer is probably no. There's a big learning curve. Excuse me. There's a big learning curve to driving a car. But it enables you to go somewhere a lot faster than if you're walking. Now, there's a less steep learning curve to learn to ride a bicycle, but it's still more of a learning curve than walking. So if you just say, I'll take the subway, walk. I don't need to learn to ride a bike or learn to drive a car. You're fine. But if you know what? I don't know how to ride a bike. I don't know how to ride a car. And I'm going to need to get via my own power from New York to Los Angeles. It might behoove you to learn one or the other, probably to learn how to drive a car. So if you're a salesperson for GE and you need to know 10-digit product numbers for the wind turbines, and you need to know them like the back of your hand, that might make sense to learn a memory system for numbers. So you can just go boom, boom, boom. I gotta learn these 300 new 10-digit numbers, this week. Well, that's going to be hard if you're just doing rote memorization. But if you have a system behind it, it's going to be a lot easier. But if you just need to occasionally remember a phone number because you dialed a lot, just rote memorize it. You know how to do that. Before we had smartphones, or even before we're both going way back here, some of the younger listeners might not get it, but there used to be phones that had a rotor on it, and you used to have to dial the number by moving your finger, and it go all the way back. And you couldn't just go beep, 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 or you couldn't even just program it into, hit recall one and it would call it. You actually had to dial a number. So we know how to do that. Anybody that's probably over, maybe 25 knows how to memorize a phone number. We just look at it. You might dial it 3 or 4 times. You might remember kind of the noise. You might look at the keypad and say, okay, 825, that's kind of all in a line there. And then 369, that's there. And then 3578, that's just, oh yeah, I got it. Because you remember the back to the picturing, you remember the image of the symbol of the number. So, or what it looks like on the phone dial. So we know how to do that. So it really depends on, what do you need? I've never helped a coaching client memorize phone numbers, aside from it's good exercise, which we can talk about. But do you really need to memorize phone numbers these days? No. A more important thing to memorize is the passwords, which is the new phone number. That's what we need to memorize. And a lot of us rely on, our browser to remember the password. And that's fine for some things. But if you're traveling, do you really want your browser to remember the passwords for your Fidelity account, or for your, HSBC bank account, or, so you lose your laptop and they manage to hack the initial password, which is relatively easy because we don't want to forget that. So we make it easy to remember, and it's easy to brute force hack. And there's other ways to get in that too. And then they open your browser window and you go to your, your bookmarks, and you go to, oh, here's his bank, and click on that, and everything's filled in and they start going to town. So passwords are a little bit tricky, and that's where, you don't necessarily need a system, but if you can remember, okay, 07, well, that's kind of like James Bond. It's not 007, it's not 007, but 07 could be James Bond. Okay, I need to remember 00. Well, I'm just going to picture 2 donuts, one on top of each other. And okay, well, a 5, that kind of looks like a fish hook. So if I need to remember a 5, I'm going to picture like a fish there. So you can kind of come up with your own little system for remembering numbers if you have to do a lot of them. And that can be an easy system where you can just go, what does the number 1 look like? Well, it looks like a candle, or it looks like a baseball bat. Well, 3 reminds me of a tricycle. 4 reminds me of a chair. Ants. Oh, ants have 6 legs. 007, that's going to be 7. 8, that looks like a snowman that had the top head fall off. And 9, I don't know what 9 means. Didn't John Lennon sing that song about number 9, 9, 9, or something like that? I don't remember. John Lennon. 9 is John Lennon. I don't know. So you can kind of come up with your own thing if you really need it. Otherwise, I say we need to pick and choose what we remember. That was kind of how we got into this, is what do we need to remember? And that's where our discernment comes in. Do we need to remember? You need to remember your sister's name is Rachel. I hate to break that to you, but you probably
Dude, she was so mean to me as a kid. I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe just block that out. So
yeah.
But so prospects' names, the people we spoke with today, the things that are important in our work life, we need to remember what our partners, whether they're business partners or personal partners, tell us, and that's part of paying attention. When our partner says, or even when our kids go on and on and on. Kids talk and they talk and they talk, and they'll go on and on and on, and somewhere in the middle there's a nugget that we should probably be hanging on to. But we kind of half tune in and half tune out, and we're not really sure where that nugget comes from. Because if they started with, Dad, here's the important thing, we could go, okay, and now I can kind of tune them out. But paying attention to them, and then at bedtime, we talk to our partner and say, oh yeah, and little Sally said that she really doesn't like that math teacher and she hates math. That's important to remember tomorrow, because maybe there's an action you need to take. Maybe you need to ask her tomorrow night about how math class was today, or say, hey, did you get any math homework? Let me help you with it. No, I'm going to, Mom's cooking. Let me sit down and help you with it. That's the important thing. So if we can do that while we're brushing our teeth, go, okay, what were the important things that I heard today before my brain says, let me throw this chunk away? What do I want to remember today?
Yep.
And that's that, getting back to that try. Right. We're trying to remember, and we're saying, well, this is important to me.
Right. Very cool. Well, I know what's important to you, and that's getting people to check out your stuff. I've got your website. It's BradZupp, ZUPP.com, right?
Yes, that's up with a Z and an extra P.
So, but you had mentioned at the start, you've got a little free report for our listeners.
Yep. There are certain things we don't have enough time to talk about here. So including some games you can play when you're driving or out for a walk, or different techniques that I didn't have a chance to talk about. So there's a free report. And it's, write this down, because you probably don't need to commit this to long-term memory. So as long as you're not driving, if you are driving, I'll help you figure it out, because I listen to podcasts when I drive and when I run. So if you're not driving, write down BradZupp.com. You can remember that like Brad Pitt, but not nearly as handsome. Zupp, Z with a up and an extra P.com. And then it's the hard to remember free report. So,
no way.
/free report. So that's what, if you write it down, BradZupp.com /free report. If you're driving or out for your run, because exercise is also a great way. Scientists have found a lot of support for exercising, especially cardio exercise. More than 20 minutes increases the brain flow, or the blood flow, all over our body, but especially our brains. This helps us to remember better. If you're out running, just think of Brad Pitt. Zupp, picture a zebra flying up in the air with like an extra balloon on it, because there's 2 P's in there. And then .com's pretty easy. And then you want that free report that's going to help you remember better.
I think you've said that once or twice, huh?
Actually, I just made that part up. I had never used the zebra before.
All right. Well, I know it's probably, just one of the hazards of the job. I mean, you go out, people probably want you to memorize a deck, whatever. I mean, because like me, they just know what a superhuman I am. Like I got to bend steel bars and like lift cars over my head. I mean, doesn't that get old sometimes? I mean, it's constantly always being tested.
It's hard because I got into this because I'm not some prodigy that's been able to remember everything since he was 4. I got into this because I'm bad at it. I've worked my way up to mediocrity.
That's awesome.
So in a memory competition setting, because I'm a memory athlete, I go to these memory competitions. We've got the picture. You've got your eyeglasses on, and you got them all blacked out except for a little spot right by your nose, so you can't see anything in your peripheral vision. I've got a baseball cap on. I've got the ear protection things on that you use when you're leaf blowing your yard or sawing something. There's no distractions. My focus is on 11, and I'm just totally there, and I can memorize the heck out of stuff. But in the real world, it's the real world, and there are distractions, and I get tested too, and it is hard. So that's why I have to make it easy for the people I do presentations for. I have to make it easy for my coaching clients. And I do that by experimenting on myself. Does this work, or is this just something I read and it sounds good? You talked in a podcast recently about the instant expert. I read someone's free report, so now I'm an expert, and I'm going to write a book about it and going to do keynote speeches on it, even though I'm not really an expert. I'm an expert on this because I've done the reading, and then I've put it to the test over and over and over, thousands of hours of memory training for competitions, but also going to mixers, going to keynote speeches, and before the speech, meeting people and seeing, how many people can I remember this time? And start out with, I'd try to remember 5 or 10. And now I can generally nail people's names. I can get between 20 and 50 in 5 minutes, first names, depending on the difficulty.
Right.
So if they're multi-ethnic or from different backgrounds, that's harder for me than the names I might be more familiar with. So if I'm overseas or something, that's a lot harder. I can't do nearly that many. Kids, sometimes these, when I'm memorizing college kids, or even I do elementary school presentations, and boy, people are coming up with some interesting names for their kids, and I might get 5 or 6 in a row that's just like, what's your name? How do you spell that? And I'm not trying to remember it. I'm trying to understand what the heck the name is. I'm like, okay, let me see. I might have a kind of pre-programmed visual, since I do this a lot for a Wes or for a Shannon or a Rachel or a Michelle or a Steve. But when I'm getting like a Cody, okay, that's not a really unusual name, but it's not a name I hear very often. So how am I going to remember Cody? Okay. All right. I got it. And how am I going to remember, Genesis? All right. I can get a Genesis. I got the Genesis. I'm hitting you upside the head with the Bible. I got it. Genesis is your name. As long as I don't remember New Testament, I think I'm fine. Right. So there's some complications there, but I've got it. So, yeah, all these things I've tested on myself, and it's hard to be a memory guy because, well, the very first time I did a memory presentation, I'll confide in you here. We'll be honest now. The very first time I did a memory presentation, I forgot a key component of the summation of my presentation. Didn't remember to bring it. I had everything in a briefcase, and the briefcase was looking worn, so I got a new briefcase for this first presentation, put it all into the new briefcase, and as there's a bunch of other junk in the old briefcase, so I didn't put everything in there. I didn't put the one thing I needed, or the thing I needed at the end. And I got to the place, and I was about to do this. It was a free thing, so it wouldn't have been bad to just skip the summation, or I could have, I guess, admitted I did it. But as it was, I got there, and I don't have enough time to get home and get this. But I called my wife and I said, honey, you're not going to believe this. The memory guy for his first real big presentation has forgotten the thing. Will you go back to the house in my old briefcase? It's still in there. Are you at your lunch break? Can you go do that? She's like, sure. She runs. She comes in the backstage entrance, which I unlocked, and she left it right at the back of the stage. And I heard her when I was on stage, the back door opened and closed. And I was like, I hope that's my wife coming in. And I was like, and I'd like to sum up by showing you this. And I kind of parted the curtain and looked back there, and there it was. And I pulled it out and I did the summation. And I could admit that now, many years later. But sometimes it happens. We forget things, and that's natural. It's okay. Everybody forgets things. We admit it. We move on. The danger is when we're forgetting too many things and it's costing us business, or it's making an impression on our kids or our families or our business partners. And the worst is when you can see it. I've seen it when I was when I first began this journey. I'd see it. I'd miss someone's name, and I'd just see it in their eyes. Like the credibility just instantly diminishes. Mm-hmm. Or my wife would say something, and 3-4 days later, she'd say, "Oh, on that project I was working on, it's finally getting better." And I'd just look at her blankly, like, "What project?" And the pain in a partner's eyes,
right,
when we completely blow it. And if that's happening, you better get your butt in gear and start focusing on improving your memory. If we occasionally have a brain fart, whatever, no big deal. Everybody does it. But if it's impacting your career or your personal life, that's when it's time to start kicking these into high gear.
Yep. All right. Everybody listening, kick it into high gear. BradZupp.com/free report. Well, Mr. Brad, thanks for sharing your words of wisdom on the Sales Podcast. It's been great.
Thank you very much, Wes. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a great day.
You too.
What did I tell you at the beginning, huh? You got to focus. You got to prepare. You have to open your mind and let the information come in. You have to practice, drill, and rehearse. Good old Tom Hopkins. Practice, drill, and rehearse. All of these things. If you want to have a better memory, you can have a better memory if you do the right things. If you want to hit the golf ball better, you have to practice doing the right things. If you want to write better emails, you have to do the right things. You have to read great writers. You have to write. You have to get started. You have to do it over and over again, because the old saying, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you get going and you get good at it. And practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. So you have been practicing having a bad memory. You've been practicing being distracted. You've been practicing trying to master multitasking. And you've created these things to be almost permanent in your life. So don't be too hard on yourself if it takes you more than this podcast, if it takes you more than this afternoon to perfect this. You're having to overcome, rewire months and even years or maybe even a lifetime of bad habits. So people always overestimate what they can achieve in 6 months or a year, and they underestimate what they can achieve in 3 or 5 years. So cut yourself some slack, but get started. You cannot control the outcome of any interaction with anybody else, but you can control yourself. I have a saying that daily discipline done diligently determines destiny. You just have to do the right little things every day, every hour, every 15 minutes, and you'll build up new habits, new routines, new things that put more money in your bank account, that give you a more rewarding life. In sales, I always ask, what's the number one job of a salesperson? And people always say, make sales, blah, blah, blah. And it's really, your number one job is to prospect. You and I cannot control if somebody gives us money, but we can control ourselves. Do we put ourselves into a situation where we're in front of people that can likely buy from us? And so if we say and do the right things in front of the right people, then the sales will happen. They don't just magically appear. So what are you doing to put yourself in that situation? One of the things I've started doing, and I mentioned at the top of the show, was creating the new Inbound Sellers. And along with that monthly membership is a free daily email that you can subscribe to. If you go to thesaleswhisperer.com/session 203, you can not only get the notes and the links from this interview, but at the top right, you'll see an opt-in, and it's free to get my $97 report. It's the episode issue number 1 in a digital format, and you'll get my daily pearls of wisdom. Okay, and in that free report, you're going to see the exact emails I created. It spans over 30 pages. Okay, it's an email sequence that I created when I launched a sales training program over a year ago. And I use that to drive traffic, get opt-ins, make sales. So you'll see that from the inside out, and I deconstruct it, showing all the PSs, PPSs, or PSs, PSs, yeah, and PPSs even, and how I pre-frame things, how I invite or warm up the reader to know to prepare for something else, so they stay engaged, so they keep looking for the next one. It's just like on a TV show or a movie, it says to be continued, right? And just before they push them off the cliff or pull the gun out, the show stops and you got to tune in to the next time. So it's a cliffhanger, right? So you're building that up as well in email. And I show how I use multimedia, including images and podcasts, to keep people engaged. So again, head on over to thesaleswhisperer.com/session203, get the notes, and then opt in for the dailies. All right. As always, thanks for listening. Please leave comments. Please leave 5-star reviews on iTunes. It helps us grow. Share this on social media. And whatever you do, make sure you sell different.